Speaking for myself and aware of the complete irrelevance of such a remark, all I need at ground zero is a void and a flag. I add a flag because the attack upon the World Trade Center was an act of politics, of ideology, of history. It is for our public philosophy that these enemies wish to destroy us. Individuals were murdered, but owing to their membership in the group. When I say a void and a flag, I do not mean to say that the flag will fill the void. I do not impute to my country or to my love of it a salvific power. But it is hardly controversial, I think, or a collapse into jingoism, to suggest that we were attacked because we are Americans, and so Americanism deserves to be remembered and honored at the site. Still, we do not mourn only as citizens. We are hated in our generalities, but in our particularities we hurt. There are wounds in our spirits that history cannot close, even if history opened them. If there should be a void in Lower Manhattan, it is not least because a void is what actually is the case. The people are gone, the buildings are gone. A monument must find a way to reconcile the memory of an event with the sense of its finality. In memory, the dead live again. This is one of the many ways in which memory lies to us, and one of the many reasons that we have promoted memory into our mysticism and conferred upon it such an extraordinary amount of affection and authority. But the dead are dead, and a monument to the dead must forbid us to elide the truth. A cold facticity must ward away a hot sentimentality. The memorial traditions of architecture, religious and secular, have generally sought to qualify or even to deny the sense of finality by furnishing justifications or consolations. But I can think of no more precise representation of the sense of finality, no more appropriate place of assembly for the disconsolate than a void. Emptiness is the spatial equivalence of silence, and it is time for some silence. The banalization of September 11th was accomplished by the media with indecent alacrity. Has a catastrophe ever become a cliché so swiftly? A few weeks I heard a cleric speak earnestly but thoughtlessly about what he called the tragic events of 7/11. In this din, it is hard for a thought to grow, but the void is a retort to the din. A void is an unarchitectural monument, even an anti-architectural monument. Among the many illusions that crashed to the ground with the two towers was surely the worship of architecture. Anybody who visited Ground Zero in those terrible weeks, or anybody who saw only the photographs of the place, was filled with an Ozymandian feeling. Those were the ruins of a modern variety of pride. The planes that brought down the World Trade Center exposed, along with other frailties, the frailty of matter as a medium for the perpetuation of human progress. Indeed, it may be that the most lasting monuments to an ideal of life, the least perishable remains of a way of life, are not physical monuments or material remains. This is a conclusion, certainly, that may be drawn from the experience of a civilization that was for millennia too weak politically to dream of incarnating itself in marvelous edifices, and so had to devise an immaterial home for memory, an incorporeal sustenance. I refer, of course, to Jewish civilization. In the Jewish tradition, as is well known, the imperative to remember looms very large, but the particular requirements of Jewish memory and Jewish law are perhaps less familiar. In the Talmudic discussion of the laws for the reading of the scroll of Esther, which itself enjoins the Jews always to remember the deliverance in Persia, the 4th century sage Rava specified that this remembrance must be fulfilled by means of a book. And it is further stipulated that this book must not only be quietly contemplated, it must also be read aloud. This latter point is established by remarking upon the duplication of language in the scriptural injunction to keep alive the memory of the eternal foe Amalek. The passage in Deuteronomy says first, "Remember what Amalek did unto thee," and then a few verses later it adds, "Thou shalt not forget it." The Talmudic gloss is that forgetfulness refers to shichachat halev, forgetfulness in the heart, whereas remembrance or schira is befeh, by the spoken word. A few pages earlier, the Talmud establishes more generally that remembrance, chira, is the equivalent of action, or asiyah. So words and rituals, those are the monuments that the Jewish tradition demanded of its mnemonically oppressed sons and daughters. Those are its most powerful weapons against oblivion. The Jewish tradition, for reasons of ideal and for reasons of reality, elected not to make its survival contingent upon physical circumstance. It chose culture over stone. We have the option of stone, but I wonder whether we have the option of culture. Can a culture that is consecrated to the dispersal of consciousness, that elevates the notorious inconstancy of the mind into a virtue, so that a consumerist attitude towards words and images may be presented as a cognitive achievement, that boasts about its acceleration of experience beyond any possibility of real fascination and real fidelity, that overstimulates the individual so wildly that the individual is understimulated and finally made insensible, that fears repetition even as it repeats everything, that seeks knowledge only in the form of information, that prizes contemporaneity above all else, and believes, in the words of a prominent literary critic, that today is the only day we have. Can such a culture be a reliable custodian of memory? Does our language any longer possess the resources for commemoration? When the mayor of New York City and the governor of New York State renounced the attempt to find their own words at the ceremonies in Lower Manhattan a few weeks ago, and instead, like struggling school children, lamely recited the exalted diction of other leaders in other times, they conceded a terrible incompetence. Even the fakery of speechwriting now exceeds their capacity for authenticity. Shall we commit our memory to this? Perhaps we are right then to depend mainly on architecture and on the power of externalities to manipulate us into the piety that we seek. Perhaps in our commemorative and our imagination, we are too poor for anything except architecture. Thank you.